your talk was going to be language-based, and Ted does that, so that's fabulous. Thank you, Ted. Right, welcome, please, Lynne Murphy.
Okay, I hope you've had a lot to drink, because this will go better that way. So yes, my name is Lynne, and I'm a linguist, and I have been watching controversies about words. You may remember this one a few years ago. People were all up in arms because the Oxford Junior Dictionary got rid of a bunch of nature-related words. So like acorn and dandelion and cygnet. And so they stopped putting those in the school dictionary. And this caused a lot of uproar. It caused petitions. It caused a big headache at Oxford. And one of the outcomes of this was this book, which was written by a poet and an illustrator who did so well on this book because people were so far up in arms that they petitioned to make it available in every school in Scotland, every school in Yorkshire. They've got all these spin-off products. They're making a mint because a dictionary got rid of a few words. And the thing that struck me about this, being a linguist, being somebody involved in the making of dictionaries, is how much this entire thing revealed how little people understand about dictionaries, children's dictionaries, and words. Because the whole thing about these words being the lost words, the being at risk words, well, if you look at those words and how they've fared, this is over the last 100 years, they're all doing quite well, actually. And in fact, some of them, like dandelion and mistletoe, are doing very well. Conker's gone up, if you can believe it. So people love to talk about words like these because they're pretty words for pretty things. And it's kind of like with, conservation efforts, that it's the charismatic megafauna who get put at the front of people's drives about wildlife, like the panda. When really what we know is that, the majority of the creatures on the earth are actually little. They're insects. Even when we get fed these stories about little things, they give us the ones that are sort of feel like the most appealing ones, right? The bees who give us honey, who have their little stripy bodies, instead of the, nasty ones, the grubs and stuff. I want to talk about the grubs of language, okay? I want to talk about the little things that are holding the whole thing together, okay? And I want to talk about words falling out of use. This is the word the. This is the word the in American State of the Union addresses by the president over the last 200 and something years. Okay? The word the, if you want to talk about words being lost, let's look at the word the. It's not just in America. 21st century British politicians use the 15% less than 19th century British politicians did. What is happening to the? And I know if I'm talking to a crowd of approximately my age, I think you probably average out around there, you'll be thinking of the, right? Because here they came along, or he came along, in the 80s. That should have upped our number of thes, but no, they're still going down. And I was glad to see that my idea for a the tribute band named the has also made it into the world, which allows us to say the sentence, are they the fans love? I'm doing my part for the. But if we talk about the is a proper noun, a proper name, which is made out of a noun, the, that's reflecting the determiner, the. And how many people thought determiner when they saw the word the? I'm betting not many. Because you come from the land where in red, or a lot of you do, where English grammar comes from, right? as opposed to the part of the world in white where people actually learn about English grammar. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about English grammar. So determiners are words that go in the front of a noun phrase to tell you which ones or how many. So, we could put any of these things into the phrase something tennis champion, the tennis champion, each tennis champion, one tennis champion, England's tennis champion, whichever. You might have thought of the word articles if you learned a little bit about grammar, that the articles are a special kind of determiner. They tell us sort of specifically, is it a unique one or is it just anyone? So going back to the, this is the day your life will surely change, works as a lyric because it's the day, makes it a special day. This is a day your life will surely change, less impact because, every day your life changes. Having two special words that are articles, having a word for and a word for the, is something that only 8% of the world's languages do. So this is a place where English is really an outlier. But I'm not going to pay as much attention to or an, because it's doing fine. So the red line is the ands and us in those speeches, and the T's or the blue T's are the thes. That is having a problem. But I want to sort of, pause for a moment on, these words are weird, okay? If only 8% of the world's languages have separate words for and the, where do they come from? In English's case, like many Western European languages, our came from our word for one, but it's split. We thought one's not good enough. We want a special word for And our word for the is shrouded in a bit of mystery, but it seems to come from the same place we got this and that from. So we've split these uses into all these teeny tiny little things. And as you can see, the oldest form we can trace that to is actually sa, which then changed into tha with this letter called a thorn, right? Which sometimes was written to sort of look like a Y to us, which is why you see things like ye old shoppy. It's really not ye, it's the old shoppy. But what we end up with here is a th sound at the start of the instead of a th sound. And that's also another weird thing about English. We only let that th sound happen in certain really, really basic words, the words we call function words. Whereas if you had a noun or a verb that started with th, it would be pronounced th. So we don't say think, we say think. And we don't say th, we say the. And so there's something funny going on there about what the role of that sound has in English grammar. We spell it the same in any case. Some of you might have thought about, well, up north, they sometimes say ta, right? Went to red light shows. I'm not going to do an accent. I cannot do an accent. But that ta there is a the. Except nobody's really sure that it's the same word as the. It might have evolved from a completely different direction from the. So those origins are shrouded in mystery. I said earlier only 8% of the world's language have a special word for and a special word for the. This many languages have a special word for the. Okay, it's having both that only 8% don't have. But the white dots on here are languages that have no way of expressing the. There are some in the middle that have things like a suffix for the, like Swedish does, or that can say that but can't say the. But the ones in white have absolutely no way of expressing the kind of thing. And that is probably most of the people in the world, because if we look at, say, the top 10 languages spoken in the world, as first languages, most of them, only 3 of the top 10 have a the rest of them don't. So Russians don't have the, Chinese speakers don't have the, which is why you end up in the situation of a Russian man going around London and not understanding why nobody will answer him when he says, "What is time?" Teaching people when to say that is really hard. And if your first language is English, you never had to be taught it. You just did it somehow, naturally. But when we try to teach people how to say, when to say the, when not to say that, they get instructions like this. The first time you mention something, use an I saw a movie last night. The second time you mention it, you say the. I saw a movie last night, the movie was entertaining. A man ran into the street, a car hit the man. All right, fine. But where did that come from? Right? There was a the that didn't have an okay? So whenever we try to explain to people, this is how you use the, they use it in the wrong places, and then they don't use it in the right places. And it's, when we try to teach computers where to use the, it's really, really hard too. This is a recipe for focaccia. Mix the flour, baking powder, a little milk, butter, grated cheese. Roll out the dough. Nobody mentioned anything about dough. Where did the dough come from? You're just supposed to know it's the dough, right? How do you teach an artificial intelligence that, there were all these things, and now, we've got the dough. So all those sorts of things are a bit funny. And what often happens, this is when Chinese writers start writing in English, these are business school students, they end up with what's called the flooding, where they just stick the in anywhere they can, right? So the role of the human resources is not only in the manufacture, but also important in the management, right? Lots and lots of does. And I say, good for those Chinese students. That makes an awful lot of sense, because the is the word that we use more than any other word in the language. It's a complete mystery why we use it, so just stick it in wherever you can. And it's 6% of what you say is the word the. Think you have a vocabulary of like 40,000 words, and just that one word is 6% of what you say. So, yeah, stick it in wherever you can, because people who use more the get better marks at university. This is a fact. They look at, essays that did well, essays that did less well, and the essays that did well had more thes. Because if you've got more thes, then you've got more descriptive nouns. You're not just saying it all the time. If you're using it, you're using bigger words than things like it. And you're putting more words in your sentence, and all of those things impress teachers. So yes, Chinese students put the thes in. So A students are high the users. People who use more the are found to be more organized and more emotionally stable than people who use less the. These were all based on studies where they had people do things like write an essay about 9/11, right, or stuff like that, and they looked at who had the people who are more conscientious. Okay? Who else uses the? Who do you think uses more the? British or American? We've got a mixed thing. We've got flu or the flu. In hospital, my things went awry. I used to think that they evened out. That every time a British person said the menopause, an American said in the hospital, and it all sort of evened out. But the numbers go for the British. The British have more thes than Americans do, mostly because of things like saying on the Tuesday, in the high street, stuff like that, where Americans wouldn't. Watching the tennis. Which gives us a nice big word to learn for today, which is arthritis versus anarthritis. So an arthritis phrase is one that has the. And so when I talk to people about British and American English, people always say, well, why do Americans leave out the in the menopause? Why do they leave out the when they're talking about streets or times or things like that? And I have to say, well, you know, there isn't actually much logic to it. There's no more logic to your way of doing it than the American way of doing it. There's not even logic within our own selves. You know, so you could say these things either way, but most of the time when you talk about harps, you say the, and most of the time when you talk about bass guitar, you don't. You go down the pub, but you go to church, even though you're basically worshiping at both, right? You go in the past, but in future. Why does one get the menopause, but puberty. Each of them only happens to you once. Why does one get the? Why are programs on the radio, but on television? You know, so we've got a lot of mysteries going on here. It's not about what's more logical, it's about habits learned. Men use more the than women do. But that's in part because women are using more personal pronouns. Women are talking more about people, men are talking more about things. I'm just talking averages. Take it across. This is all based in actual statistics. The older use the more than the young. Which maybe you might think, well, maybe that's because of this the is going down. So young people say it less than older people. Older people are, you know, raising the banner for the. But it's probably not that, because the decline is slow. It might be because they're a little bit less self-centered than young people. So ask a young person to tell you a story. I'm talking very young. And they'll tell you a lot of stories about I and my friends, and not as many about the situation. But the big question is it because old people have memory trouble? So instead of saying a person's name, they say, the lady who I was talking to, right? So the loss might be a sign of something you need to have checked out. And The Onion, of course, captures it with Google launches the Google for older adults. My dad, throughout the first lockdown, was calling it the Covis. I don't know where the S came from, but I know where the came from. The is used more by the socially conservative than by the liberal. And, you know, things like Donald Trump talking about the African Americans was a dog whistle for people to recognize. He was saying them there who I'm stereotyping as all being the same, that sort of thing. And you get that with people talking about the gays, the women, the blacks, etc. You also get it when politicians talk about each other. So one linguist has looked at when Democrats talk about Republicans, they call them the Republicans, but when they talk about Democrats, they say Democrats, and vice versa for the Republicans. So you're using that the in sort of an accusing way. And I'm very conscious of that when I'm asked questions like, why do the Americans eat lots of cinnamon? That the, you know, tells me they don't approve of it. Whereas, why do Americans eat lots of cinnamon? Sounds like a more genuinely curious question, right? So whenever I see the Americans, I go, I got the measure of you. So those are some of the things that the can tell us, that looking deeply at the can do for us. It raises lots of mysteries about how English has got to be the way it is. It gives us lots of things to wonder about who people are and how they communicate who they are through how they talk. To give one other little example that I liked, someone looked at different film directors and how their male and female characters talked by looking at words like the. And doing that, you find out that Nora Ephron's women and men both talk the same. More like women. And Quentin Tarantino's women and men all talk like men. But Spike Lee is very good at switching between. Anyway, that was a side point. Back to talking about that. I'm not actually worried about the loss of the. If people call me the Americans a little bit less, I'd be perfectly happy. But also, I'm not worried about the because even losing 15% of the still has it being the top word in English by a long shot. So the top blue line versus of, the third most used word in English. There's a big gap between, and you can see the words from the lost words there at the bottom. They don't even make it. So those are some of the things I find interesting about the. I'll leave you with a cartoon. You're out of the halibut, why isn't it crossed out? We're also out of the chalk. So I want to leave you with these mysteries. Where did the come from? Why did it come? How did you learn how to use it? How do you know when to use it? How do you know to use it when you don't know how to use it? And what can it tell us about where we belong, how we belong, and what we do? So that's what I want to leave you with, and thank you very much.